Hi, I'm Nathan W. Bingham with Ligonier Ministries, and we are here in Ephesus, Turkey, as part of Ligonier's 2022 Mediterranean Study Tour. I'm joined by Steve Nichols, President of Reformation Bible College, also a Ligonier Ministries Teaching Fellow. Well, Steve, we are here in Ephesus, and Paul wrote his letter to the church here in Ephesus, Ephesians, a wonderful epistle, beloved by many. Could you just give us a little flyover of that letter to the church here in Ephesus?
Yeah, sure. So Paul is in Rome. He's in prison. It's his first imprisonment. He's going to get released. He'll be imprisoned again, and then he'll be martyred. But in his first imprisonment, he writes this wonderful epistle that we all love. You mentioned Ephesians 2:8-9. It's probably one of the first verses that many Christians memorize. Paul had been in this city for 2 years on his third missionary journey. He knew this church, loved this church. He had poured himself into this church. And so he just writes this magnificent epistle, the Epistle of Ephesians. And think about this, Nathan. So Paul writes it, and it gets brought here, and it's read for the first time in churches here in the city of Ephesus, this great epistle of Paul's.
That's incredible. We are here. It kind of gives you goosebumps. Why Ephesus, though? Why did Paul come here and spend so much time here?
Yeah, so Ephesus is a very strategic city. This is considered Asia. It was the Roman province of Asia, and Ephesus was a seat of power in Asia. It had the temple of Artemis or Diana, which was one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. It was this massive temple, had 127 columns. Only one of them is standing. And it was a seat of power that really had influence throughout this region of Asia. Paul knew that. He's from Tarsus, which is here in Asia, and both Tarsus and Ephesus are in modern-day Turkey. And from here, he knew that there could be a strategic planning of other churches. And in fact, this home base of Ephesus planted 7 churches, and these are the 7 churches that open those chapters of John's apocalypse. Church of Smyrna, Philadelphia, Laodicea, all of those were efforts that originated here and then worked their way out. So very important city, very important for Paul to spend time here and dispatch his associates as they went to various cities to plant churches.
Well, yesterday, Acts 17 really came alive. We were there on Mars Hill. You got to speak where Paul spoke. Tell us about Acts chapter 19, because this theater here plays a role.
It does play a role. It's an important chapter in Paul's journey. So I mentioned Artemis. This is the goddess of Ephesus, this massive temple. And it's sort of like the temple in Jerusalem. People from all of Israel would come to Jerusalem for the temple. Well, people all around Asia would come to Ephesus for the temple of Artemis. And there's Demetrius, he's mentioned in chapter 19, part of the guild that would build these little shrines that people would have in their house, or the wealthy would build larger shrines. He may have even invested in this industry, calls the guild together and says, this guy Paul, who's now been here for 2 years, and all these people are converting and Christianity is spreading, he's very bad for business. And there's just this thing that Luke records there in Acts chapter 19 where Demetrius says, Paul actually says, gods made by hand are not gods. And, as we read that, we think, yeah, he's right.
He's right.
It's an obvious thing there, Demetrius. Well, he gets his fellow guildmen all worked up. They get some key people in the crowd worked up, and out there on the streets, which we were just walking, the marble streets here in Ephesus, he gets everybody wound up. As the text says of Acts 19, the whole city filled into this amphitheater. This is a very typical Roman amphitheater, wonderful construction, no amplification, but your voice would just carry. Well, when you read Acts chapter 19, I remember when I first read it, you sort of get the impression of maybe it's a couple hundred people and they're, shouting and raising their fists in the air. Thousands of people. And Luke tells us that for 2 hours, this great crowd was shouting down. In fact, he uses the word cried, could be translated howled. You have a howling mob. And for 2 hours, they're shouting, Artemis is great. Artemis is great. Well, town clerk comes in, reads the situation, says, there's no crime here. You all need to disperse and move on. And
calm down and carry on.
Calm down and carry on.
Yeah.
And so the riot at Ephesus comes to an end. Beginning of chapter 20, Paul goes on to Macedonia, modern-day Greece, Philippi, Corinth, Thessalonica, those cities. But brings an end to Paul's time here at Ephesus, but the church continued. But here was Acts chapter 19 played out in this very amphitheater where we are standing.
Well, before we go, is there anything else we need to know about Ephesus?
There's a lot we need to know about Ephesus. I don't think you can overestimate the importance of Ephesus in the first century in the New Testament to us as Christians. We've got the epistle to the Ephesians. We've got Paul here on his second missionary journey, on his third missionary journey for 2 years. We've got Timothy here. Paul says in the opening chapter of 1 Timothy, to Timothy, remain in Ephesus. Stay here, have a pastoral ministry. And if that weren't enough, Nathan, John comes here. And so we have John finishing out his final decades here. Of course, he's exiled to the Isle of Patmos, where he writes the book of Revelation. But it's very likely that he penned the Gospel of John in this city of Ephesus. So such a rich history. It's a delight for me to be here. I know it's a thrill for you to be here among the ruins of Ephesus, just thinking about what God accomplished in the first century and what God continues to accomplish through those books, Ephesians and John, over the centuries, over the millennia. Our hearts just are thrilled with what has come out of the city and what God has done here.
Well, thank you, Steve Nichols. If you'd like to join us for an upcoming study tour, you can find all of those trips at ligoniertours.com.